Hello and welcome to my channel. So I wanted to make this video for quite some time now because, as you know, hopefully, you can create sewing patterns on my website in the sizes European 36 up to 60. But did you know that you can also create a measure set with your very own measurements, so you can create the pattern to your own size? I hope you do. But in case you don't, I'm here to show you in this video how you need to take all these measurements. Now, there are quite a lot of measurements to take, but this is because I don't want to work with any formulas. In the ready-to-wear apartment, we are using quite a lot of formulas to determine the sizes, and I don't want to do this because everybody is different and these rules might not apply to you. So I suggest you take your time, take all the measurements, write them down, create your measure set, and then you can create all the patterns and never worry about the size again. So let's do it. Meet my little assistant. Let me introduce you to Liv. Now, Liv is not a child, Liv is a half size, so she does represent a grown-up female figure, but alas, in half scale. She is about a European 36, more or less, but in half scale, and she will help me today to show you how to measure. Obviously, I cannot show every measurement on her because she simply doesn't have hands or feet. So I will jump in this case to show you on my own body. But I think we can get most of the measurements from her. And you will see that I have tied a little elastic around her. This is a pretty good tool to help us with the measurements. And to begin, I'll put the elastic up at the widest part of her bust. Try to make that parallel to the floor. Okay. And this is where we will get the first measurement. It's just wrap a measuring tape around and take the bust scope as our first measurement. Now, this measurement needs to be divided into 4. And to do this, I have some little clips here. And I will divide this at the arm. So imagine here is an arm hanging down, and I will mark the place where the arm comes in. Just putting the clips here. Down the other side, the same position. This is actually a bit easier when there's an arm. So now we take measurements for the bust width. That's here, the front part. We take the back width. That's here. And we take the arm diameter. This is the part between the clips here. Can you see this? Here, between the clips. Now these 4 measurements need to sum up to the bust scope that we measured in the first place. Okay, we can take this down. Now we measure the upper arm scope simply by wrapping the measurement tape around the upper arm. She said simple. It's not so easy. on oneself, but like this. Of course, you should measure yourself in your underwear and not over a dress like I do right now. I think you can do this. And now, first page is already done. So, next one. What do we have here? I put the elastic back down to the waist. What we now want to measure is the front length. This is from the shoulder, basically the point where the shoulder seam will hit later, over the bust to the waist. And then the bust depth is the same placement, but we measure to the highest point of the bust. Highest point. I mean the widest point of the bust, which is in most cases your nipple. So we measure down here. And speaking of bust point, we need the distance between the two. That's here. And then we basically repeat this on the back. So from the shoulder down to the waist. And the next measurement is a little bit tricky. I am moving the elastic again up to the point where the arm begins, so basically at the height of the armpit. Now that's not right. Basically here. Okay, one moment. I need to tidy a little lift up a bit. So here is the armpit, here's our elastic. And we take the measurement from the shoulder down to here. This is the point where the armhole of the pattern will begin. So we need to get this side right. This measurement is likely to take in too long, so that your armpit sits too low on your pattern. So make sure to check this. There is a method to control this. I will show this later on. So what have we next? Okay, the next one is again an easy one. Let's move the elastic down to the waist. If you're not sure where your waist sits, the elastic will help you with it. So just tie the elastic around your waist and stretch a little bit. And then the elastic will snap into the right position. Little lift can do that, but you can, I'm sure. So we take the waist scope, simply wrapping this around and taking this measurement. And second page done. Next one, your hip scope. Again, I'm moving the elastic to about the widest part of the hip. If you're not sure which is the widest part of your hip, there is a little trick. You can take some white piece of paper and wrap it around the hip, and you should make sure that this line up vertically, and then you will see where the hip hits the paper. So I will say this is here, and I will take this measurement like this. And now I could use a second piece of elastic, because now I want to determine the hip depth. So this is the measurement between the waist and the point where I measured the hip scope just before. Next, we have the neck width. So up here. Now you don't take the circumference. Don't. You need the width. So straight across here. This measurement does not need to be overly precise because in most cases you will add some centimeters or more centimeters to your neck hole. So that is not that important, but do your best. And now we're staying up, getting the shoulder width. So that's from one point, from one side of the shoulder to the other side of the shoulder, about the point where the arm seam, the sleeve seam will hit later. And then the neck, the shoulder depth. So this is basically here the measurement from the top of the shoulder to the bottom of the shoulder. So this helps with the slope of the shoulder. And when we need the arm length, she has no arms, I will step in. So basically I take the measurement. I take the measure tape in my hand and I wrap it around the arm up to the shoulder. And it is important that the arm is bent. And you measure from your shoulder to your wrist with a bended arm. Page 3, done. So we're halfway through. Now we need the wrist scope. That's pretty easy too. You just wrap the measuring tape around your wrist and measure that. Now the next measurement is a bit weird because we need to determine the depth of a crotch. So basically waist to crotch, but this measurement is not taken here with a standing dress form, but while sitting down. So you sit down on a chair and then you measure from your waist to the surface of a chair. Next I can show again on little Liv, because then we need the thigh scope. So we're wrapping the measuring tape around the thigh and measuring the widest part of it. So the next, let me move this up again. Next measurement is the knee depth. So we measure from the waist down to the knee. And next measurement, no, it's not the next measurement. So we measure from the waist to the knee. The next measurement is the knee scope. So basically wrapping around this here on the height of your knee. And the ankle scope, the same as the wrist, just wrap the measuring tape around your ankle and you're done. That was page 4. Now we need to take the waist height. So it's basically the leg length. So we measure from the waist all down to the floor. Now the next measurement is not exactly a measurement. It's more a setting, because then you have How do you say it? So you need to ask yourself, how does your butt look? Weird, I know. So basically, do you have a quite flat buttock? Is it medium or is it large? So basically, do you need much length for a pants in your back or maybe less length? That's the point here. So you just select if you have a flat, a medium or a strong buttock in this point. No measurement taken actually. So, and the last for the regular measurements is the head scope. Horizontal head scope. So you just wrap the measuring tape around your head, horizontal to the floor, and write that down. Oop. So we are now done with the regular measurements. Now there are some additional measurements you can use if your pattern does not fit exactly like you want to. You don't need this. So the next measurements are optional, but in some cases they can help you with the perfect fit. So the first one is the elbow depth. So like we measured the full arm length, we are determined the length from the shoulder to the elbow. Now this measurement is only used for a specific type of sleeve with a dart here on the underarm, which is used in the coat, in the Princess Line coat pattern kit. If you are not planning to do this kind of sleeve, you don't need this measurement. And then we have the high back width. Now we already have taken the back width measurement, but on the level of a bust. Now in some cases, if you have a very broad back, this might not give you enough ease to move your arms comfortably. So in this case, you can take the high back width, which is basically here where the arms set onto your back. So if you feel like your blouses or jackets fit a bit snug in the back, you can set this measurement and increase this. This measurement does not apply to stretchy pattern. So these fabrics stretch, you don't need these extra length in the back. Now a measurement important for the pants, which is also a bit weird because you need to measure your crotch length. This means I pull the measuring tape between her legs and up. So I measure from the waist in the back to the waist in the front. So, like this. This is the full crotch length. And then you need the front crotch length, which is measured like this. So this is basically the point where the seam of your pants will hit in the front. Might be easier to determine on a finished mock-up than on your actual body. So if you think, oh, I need more length in the back or in the front than the default pattern making gives you, just take these measurements. And two special measurements for pants are left. So Liv has a very smooth figure, so there are no hip dips or something like that, and the widest part of the hips sits about here, and this is kind of where the pattern making expects you to have the widest part of the hip. But in some bodies that's simply not the case. You might have your widest part of your hips down here or up here. Everyone is different. So if this is the case for you, so your widest part of the hips is up here or down here somewhere and not here on about 2/3 of the hip, then you can take this measurements, because your pants might end up to be too loose or too snug. So you measure here. Let me take down our elastic. So you take the measurement about here. And in that case, you need to add the hip depth again, this time for this help measurement for the pants. These two measurements will only apply to pants. And that is it. I have finished all my measurements, and now I will put these into my website. So I go to dressdeveloper.de and then to measure set, complete. And then I put all the measurements we just made for little Liv here into the program. And then I can download a measure set. A measure set is simply a little text file which contains all your measurements in a machine-readable form. You can unzip it when you download it. You don't need to. It's perfectly fine to just use the zip as is. And this little file you can then upload every time you want to create a sewing pattern or a pattern kit. And you can, before you use that, create some control models. This is what I show you here. So under measure set, there is the point control, and there you can upload your measure set. And then you get two files. One file contains two strips, which you can assemble, which are these here. And these represent the more complicated measurements that you've taken, so you can check these before you waste any fabric with that. So this here are the verticals. So you have on the strip marked the front length, the back length, and the armhole depth, and the bust depth. So basically you take this and you wrap it around yourself like this. And then you can check here, this line should line up with the shoulder. Here should sit the waist. Here at this marking should be the bust point, as the nipple. And in the back, this should be the back length. Hits the waist here. And here is the marking for the armhole depth. So around the armpit here. This is fine, great. Then there's a strip of paper for the horizontal measurements. That's the bust width, which is here. And you have the arm diameter on the side. Here's the arm diameter. And here is the back width. And in the second file, you get this. You need to cut out this rectangle here. And this rectangle represents your armhole. So your width here is the arm diameter, and the depth is the armhole depth minus the shoulder depth. So you can check if you are able to put your arms around through this. There should not be much wiggling room, but you should not break the paper also. And when I check this here, I might need to decrease this a little bit. It does look a bit high. Again, this is easier when you have an actual arm. So, when you're satisfied with this, do a mock-up. You might need to do 2 or 3 mock-ups until you're very satisfied with your measurements. And I highly recommend doing such mock-ups before you cut into pretty fabric. Because when you get these measurements right, you can use it for all kinds of sewing patterns on my website and never actually worry about the fit, because you know it will fit. So here Liv is wearing some mock-ups. I made these with the blouse pattern kit and the pants pattern kit. I just used the default settings and my freshly made measure set. And I think that looks pretty good already. The bust point is maybe a smidge too high. I might lower that a bit. But other than that, the blouse looks pretty good. It has some ease, especially in the back. That's important so that you can move your arms. That looks pretty good. And the pants, these look pretty snug. Reaches up to the waist. No pulling, no gathers. Great, I think we can work with this. So, this is the end of the video. And maybe you have your own measure set with your own measurements now and can create all the patterns. If not, and there are some question marks over your head right now, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to clarify. Alas, happy sewing!